At midnight, a girl named Yumi unexpectedly saw a mysterious woman stepping out of her boyfriend Bobby's car. Initially, she didn't dwell on it, recalling that Bobby had once mentioned a new intern at work who lived nearby. Since the intern had a complicated commute, Bobby had offered her rides out of kindness. But Yumi hadn't expected the intern, Duan, to be so youthful and charming. The moment she saw her, a wave of insecurity took hold of Yumi. That unease only grew when she saw Bobby and Duan laughing together while grilling meat. Despite her discomfort, Yumi composed herself and even kindly invited Duan to stay for dinner. Duan was hesitant at first but stayed after Bobby, unaware of Yumi's feelings, encouraged her. While Bobby stepped away, Yumi and Duan chatted. Duan praised Bobby's humor and charm, making Yumi feel even more unsettled. Later, Bobby spotted Duan walking in the cold with only light clothing. Out of concern, he lent her a coat from his car. When Yumi saw Duan wearing Bobby's coat, she was surprised and silently hurt. She understood the gesture was likely innocent, but the sight still left her feeling uneasy. In truth, Bobby hadn't thought much of Duan at first. He didn't even recognize her when she initially approached him. But Duan had already developed feelings for him. She admired his composed demeanor at work and his charisma outside of it. When she learned he'd be giving her rides, she was ecstatic. But she also knew Bobby was in a committed relationship and often spoke highly of Yumi. Despite her emotions, Duan had no intention of interfering. She eventually decided to resign and return to her hometown. On her departure day, she unexpectedly encountered Bobby. Overwhelmed by emotion, Duan confessed her feelings to him. She admitted she understood he had a girlfriend and knew she shouldn't have said anything, but emotions aren't always rational. Bobby hadn't previously seen Duan in that light, but her confession stirred unexpected feelings. He began to recall her smile, her liveliness, and her work ethic. Though he knew Yumi was the one he truly loved, missing her even if they didn't speak for a day, rushing to cheer her up when she had a hard time, Duan's words lingered in his heart. Around Christmas, Yumi visited Jew Island to spend the holiday with Bobby. Upon arrival, she noticed a realtor showing someone around Bobby's apartment. That's when she discovered he was planning to move. He said it was to be closer to work, and although it unsettled her, especially knowing how much he loved coastal drives, Yumi accepted it and chose to support him. Wanting to surprise him, she decorated his apartment and bought a cake. But when she returned, she found Duan standing outside Bobby's home, looking visibly uncomfortable. Yumi calmly mentioned Bobby was moving and asked if Duan was a close friend. Duan awkwardly replied, "Best friend." Yumi soon learned that Duan had confessed her love to Bobby, and it became clear Bobby's move was connected to that. Tearfully, she realized the truth. That evening, Bobby returned with flowers only to find Yumi gone. She wouldn't answer her phone. Frantic, he drove around searching and eventually found her near a cafe. When Yumi asked if he was moving because of Duan, Bobby was silent, confirming her worst fear. Her heart broke. She never imagined ending things with the man who'd stood by her through some of her darkest time. Before Bobby, Yumi had been in a year-long relationship with a man named Guang, whom she loved deeply. She had even proposed marriage. But Guang, always focused on his career, wasn't ready for commitment. Their relationship ended not in anger but in quiet sorrow. At night, the loneliness was overwhelming. She thought of reaching out to him, but pride and fear of looking desperate stopped her. She deleted his contact and tried to move on. Yet, heartbreak lingered. One day, while washing her hair, she received a call from an unknown number. For a fleeting moment, she thought it might be Guang, perhaps calling to propose. With dripping hands, she grabbed her phone only to find it was a marketing call. The crushing disappointment made her realize how deeply she still cared. Later, she found Guang's new couple photo online, and it devastated her. She scoured mutual friends' accounts just to glimpse him again, reminding herself he was no longer hers. Changing her own profile bio to a crying emoji, she quietly mourned. On the other side of the screen, Guang saw it and felt his own heartache too. Around this time, a co-worker who had quietly admired Yumi called her late at night, under the pretense of work. Meanwhile, Yumi found herself waiting for Bobby again. When he finally showed up, his warm encouragement helped soothe her. She slowly began picking herself up, returning to routines, and opening herself to new experiences. As they spent more time together, Yumi and Bobby realized they shared similar tastes, like a love for romance novels. Bobby recommended a book that captivated her so much she stayed up reading all night. The next morning, she returned it with homemade cookies, a small gesture that brought them closer. Through these small moments, their bond deepened. Then one day, Bobby confessed his feelings. It was the first time since Guang that anyone had done so. Yumi pondered, could she begin again with Bobby and leave her past behind? But in her heart, she knew she didn't feel romantically drawn to him. With gentle honesty, she turned him down. Bobby had silently hoped for a different outcome, and her rejection disappointed him. Back home, Yumi wrestled with doubts. Had she made the right decision? She wasn't ready, and she didn't want to enter a relationship for the wrong reasons. However, the next time she saw Bobby, she noticed his cold demeanor. She greeted him, trying to ease the tension, but he replied curtly. Trying to justify it, Yumi told herself he was just naturally reserved. But that illusion broke when she saw him chatting enthusiastically with someone else soon after. Hurt but persistent, she offered to help carry his things, only to be rejected again. The emotional sting of being turned down by someone she had once comforted herself with was real. One morning, while accidentally boarding the wrong bus, Yumi saw Bobby with his ex-girlfriend. The girl affectionately tugged on his sleeve before they boarded together. That's when Yumi realized the true reason for Bobby's distance. He had reunited with his ex. Embarrassed, she realized she had misinterpreted his behavior. Later, Yumi was invited to a team dinner only to find out it was hosted by Bobby's team. Her mood soured, and things got worse when co-workers began teasing Bobby about his romantic life. When someone asked if he had feelings for anyone, Bobby replied that he did, but she had rejected him. A co-worker scoffed, her taste must be awful. Yumi, sitting nearby, felt immense guilt. She suspected Bobby had spoken loud enough for her to hear on purpose, painting himself as the hurt party. After the dinner, Yumi found herself on the same bus ride home with Bobby, forced to face the growing distance and awkwardness between them. Throughout the entire bus ride, Yumi barely allowed herself to breathe. Bobby tried to ease the tension by making conversation and cracking jokes, but Yumi responded with short, distant answers. Then, out of nowhere, Bobby rang the stop bell. He got up and said he needed to switch buses. Yumi found this odd. It wasn't like him to take this route. He insisted, saying he had gotten on the wrong bus and needed to take another. Before she could question him further, he was already gone. Yumi sat frozen, confused, but Bobby's honesty and willingness to be vulnerable stirred something in her. His boldness made her heart race, and despite her earlier rejection of him, she slowly began to notice him again, his mannerisms, his habits, the way he left certain buttons on his shirt undone. One day, she overheard a colleague mention that Bobby was going on a blind date. The woman was said to be not only beautiful but also kind and thoughtful, exactly Bobby's type. A wave of jealousy and regret hit Yumi. If she hadn't said she wanted to be just friends, would he have still gone on the date? Her chest tightened with regret, making it difficult to concentrate at work. She wrestled with the idea of confessing her true feelings to stop him from going, but it felt too impulsive. After all, she had only recently turned him down. She remembered how quickly Bobby had thrown out a couple's ring from his previous relationship. Maybe he had let go of her just as easily. On the day of his date, Yumi couldn't bring herself to do anything. Emotionally drained, she collapsed onto the sofa and fell asleep. When she woke up, she noticed a message from Bobby. He'd texted earlier, saying he wanted to return her umbrella. She replied unenthusiastically, suggesting he could return it another time. To her surprise, he replied right away, asking if she could meet him at a cafe at 10 a.m. Overwhelmed with a mix of excitement and nerves, Yumi got up early the next morning and carefully picked out her outfit. She wanted to show her best self to the man she liked. When Bobby saw her, his eyes sparkled, and a familiar warmth flickered between them. After handing over the umbrella, Yumi took a leap and invited him to stay for coffee, secretly hoping to find out how his date had gone. But Bobby kept glancing at his phone, which made her think the date must have gone well. Disappointment started to seep in. Just as she was about to let go of hope, a co-worker called and casually mentioned that Bobby never went on the date at all. Instead, he had messaged the woman to cancel, saying he wasn't emotionally ready, having just been turned down by someone he liked. A flood of relief washed over Yumi. The weight in her chest lifted. She realized it was time to stop hiding her feelings. She confessed to Bobby honestly and simply, dissolving the wall that had stood between them. From that moment on, they fell in love. Since they worked at the same company, they decided to keep their relationship a secret. They shared quick, stolen moments, subtle touches when no one was looking, passing secret notes tucked inside work files. Bobby would sneak her favorite snacks, and Yumi used a set of code words to suggest date nights. Their first official date was at a modest street food stand. As they prepared to order, Yumi hesitated. The shop was known for its beef intestines, one of her favorites, but Bobby looked so polished and tidy that she assumed he wouldn't enjoy something so intense. About to lie and say she didn't like intestines, she caught herself. If she couldn't be honest about her tastes, how could a relationship grow strong? So she admitted the truth. To her delight, Bobby smiled and accepted her preference with ease. His relaxed reaction soothed her nervousness, and Yumi felt the joy of being her true self. She realized how freeing love could be when it didn't require masks. After eating, they went to get coffee. Yumi, still high on happiness from the meal, was nearly skipping down the stairs when she tripped. She caught herself by grabbing onto Bobby's shoulder and instantly noticed the firmness of his chest beneath his shirt. Her inner voice whispered, "Wow, he definitely works out." Embarrassed, she found herself falling into his arms. They both stood still, blushing and avoiding each other's gaze. Though the atmosphere remained shy and awkward, it was filled with sweetness and emotional tension. Yumi's heart was full. Being with Bobby made her genuinely happy. He wasn't just helping her move past the wounds of her last relationship, he made every day feel new and bright. Bobby always seemed to know exactly what she needed. If she felt cold, he would drape his jacket over her without hesitation. If he found somewhere fun, he'd take her right away. His love showed in big and small ways, constantly. One day, when Yumi got into his car, Bobby casually handed her 2 mint candies. The moment she popped one into her mouth, a realization struck her. Was this his subtle way of suggesting they might kiss later? Her heart leapt. Determined to be ready, she quickly chewed the candy. Bobby watched her with amused eyes and commented, half-jokingly, that he didn't know she liked to bite into candy so fast. Yumi froze. Wait, was it really just a mint? Had she read too much into it? Embarrassed, her cheeks turned red. She was still kicking herself mentally by the time they reached their destination. That night, back at home, Yumi's ceiling light broke. With no choice, she asked Bobby if she could crash at his place for the night. On the way over, she noticed him glancing at her strangely. Then, in the elevator, it hit her, she still had a sheet mask on her face. Mortified, she laughed awkwardly while Bobby just smiled kindly. Rushing into the bathroom, she let out a small scream at the sight of herself in the mirror. She dug through her overnight bag and pulled out what she thought was loungewear, only to find she had accidentally brought a lacy camisole. Just then, Bobby offered her one of his sleep shirts. When she tried it on, it barely covered her thighs. Too embarrassed to look him in the eye, she avoided his gaze. Bobby, equally awkward, couldn't look at her either. The room buzzed with unspoken tension. Trying to break the silence, Bobby asked if she wanted to shower. When he stepped toward her, Yumi instinctively backed into the corner, flustered. But it turned out he was just trying to show her the bath products. She laughed, covering up her embarrassment. While Bobby took his turn in the shower, Yumi waited on the couch, eventually falling asleep. When Bobby returned, he found her curled up, fast asleep. Gently, he turned off the lights, laid a blanket over her, and slid a pillow under her head. He then sat near her, watching over her peacefully before falling asleep beside her. It was a quiet, uneventful night, but for Yumi, it was filled with love and contentment. The next morning, she opened her eyes to see Bobby's sleeping face just inches from hers. Her heart skipped a beat. They locked eyes for a brief, blushing moment. After getting dressed, Bobby took her to the library. The calm, warm atmosphere made Yumi fall even more in love. She remembered her old dream of becoming a writer, something she had long buried. But with Bobby's support, that dream came alive again. Fueled by his encouragement, Yumi made a bold decision. She quit her job and chose to pursue writing full-time at the age of 33. The truth was, life after their breakup had been a downward spiral, crushing debt, insomnia, and countless moments where he nearly called her, only to stop himself, terrified he'd fall apart just hearing her voice. His pride wouldn't let him show such vulnerability. Just then, Yumi received a message. Thinking it might be from her father, she asked Bobby to check her phone. Bobby, in good spirits as he continued preparing the holiday meal, opened it. It was a message from Guang. A flicker of guilt passed through Yumi. What she didn't know was that Bobby had recognized the sender. He saw it was from Guang but chose to stay quiet. He believed that true trust meant not interfering even if the message was from an ex-boyfriend. He left it to Yumi to decide. When Guang saw Yumi again, his face lit up. He rushed to greet her, visibly overwhelmed. But Yumi, now as straightforward and open as Bobby, calmly told him, "The message I sent, it was just to wish you a Merry Christmas." Caught off guard, Guang's heart ached. It was only then he understood, Yumi hadn't come to reconnect but to gently affirm that their paths should no longer cross. Days passed, and Yumi's writing kept getting rejected. While Bobby's career thrived, eventually leading to his transfer to Jeju Island, Yumi grew increasingly anxious about the widening gap between them. In an attempt to bridge it, she took on a part-time job. But after her 8th manuscript rejection, Yumi was consumed with self-doubt. Maybe she didn't have the talent she believed she did. Still, she put on a brave face for Bobby and visited him in Jeju. Bobby immediately sensed something was wrong. With quiet encouragement, he urged her not to give up. There would always be another shot. Yumi, emotionally depleted, broke down in tears. This was the life she had chosen, but it had taken its toll. Before she could fully recover, she received a surprising message from the publishing house. Although she didn't win the contest, the editors had found her idea fresh and intriguing and wanted to publish her book. She and Bobby celebrated joyfully. That evening, under a sky lit with fireworks, Bobby took her hand and slipped it into his coat pocket. Inside, she found an engagement ring. It was their 1-year anniversary. Moved beyond words, Yumi felt certain their love could withstand anything, but eventually, Yumi and Bobby broke up. Years later, Yumi unexpectedly ran into Guang. 2 years had passed since their breakup, but the moment Guang saw her, his heart stirred. He had never truly moved on. Not long before, he had learned that Yumi was now a published author. Though he acted unimpressed around his friends, he'd secretly rushed to the bookstore and bought every copy of her book. One day, while Yumi quietly visited a store to see how her books were doing, she saw they had sold out. She was overwhelmed by disbelief and happiness. 2 years earlier, after the collapse of his startup, Guang had hit rock bottom. When he saw Yumi again, he tried to act cool, leaning on a flashy new car to show off his success. But Yumi just laughed. He was still as goofy and endearing as ever. The truth was, Yumi already knew about his achievements from a magazine article. She had read about the smash hit game he developed and felt genuinely happy for him. After that meeting, Guang's emotions were a mess. But one thing was clear, seeing Yumi had reignited something in him. A year earlier, he had considered trying to win her back on Christmas, but she had a boyfriend then. When he looked her up online and discovered it was Bobby, he resigned himself to letting her go. For 6 months, he worked hard to erase her from his heart, pouring everything into his work. One of his first steps was to part ways with the illustrator who had introduced them. But during that conversation, the illustrator let it slip. Yumi and Bobby had broken up. Upon hearing that she was single again, something shifted within Guang. He became determined to win her back. He created multiple anonymous accounts and left glowing comments on her new online novel. The exaggerated praise made Yumi laugh, even though she couldn't explain why the support felt so strangely familiar. One day, a co-worker called Yumi to warn her Bobby had returned to town. Since they still lived in the same apartment complex, the colleague wanted her to be prepared in case they crossed paths. After that, Yumi made a point to avoid Bobby entirely, even avoiding her favorite bakery just in case. But one weekday, craving a coffee, she let her guard down and visited a cafe Bobby used to frequent. Surely he wouldn't be there, she thought. But while standing in line, she heard a voice behind her. It was Bobby. She greeted him warmly but kept her distance. As their conversation ended and she turned to leave, Bobby stopped her. He stepped closer and told her, sincerely, how much he missed her. He confessed that after their breakup, life had lost all color. He had once tried to win her back but had been too late. Since then, he had seen Yumi again, briefly, and treated her coldly, thinking it was for the best. But he'd quietly followed her writing career, always avoiding the chance of bumping into her. Now, seeing her again, he told her, I thought I would die from missing you. Yumi, who had told herself she was long over him, felt her emotions surge uncontrollably. Tears spilled down her face. Bobby, devastated to see her cry, promised himself he'd never let her hurt again. They began seeing each other again, going on dates and revisiting old habits. But something felt different. There was a strange tension Yumi couldn't quite name. Soon after, while meeting an illustrator to discuss a potential collaboration, Yumi encountered Guang, clearly not a coincidence. The illustrator had orchestrated it. Although Yumi had reconciled with Bobby, she hadn't made it public yet. Still, she felt she needed to tell Guang directly, but he was unaware. With hope in his eyes, he invited her to dinner. Yumi hesitated. There were billions of people in the world. Why did people always circle back to their exes? That bittersweet mix of hope and disappointment made Guang blurt things out emotionally. If he couldn't be with her, he at least wanted to send her off properly. But Yumi, worried about misunderstandings or rumors, insisted on taking a taxi. Later, she called Bobby to say she'd be late, claiming a friend had broken a bone and needed help. When she mentioned it was Guang, Bobby's heart sank. Even though Yumi insisted it was purely work-related, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Meanwhile, Guang felt humiliated and empty. Not wanting to burden Yumi further, he forced a smile and said, "Go ahead. I'm not in the best mood anyway." Yumi noticed that Guang's shirt had ripped, probably from his earlier fall. The sight stirred compassion within her, stirring up a wave of old memories. She recalled the time she had been sick and how Guang had carried her to the hospital, even bringing her new clothes. She couldn't let him return home in torn clothes. While heading out to buy him something to wear, Yumi realized she'd forgotten her phone. Guang saw this and rushed to bring it to her, only to run straight into Bobby. The tension was immediate. Two men with unresolved rivalry now face to face. Bobby accepted the phone, calm on the surface, but things escalated when Guang spoke on Yumi's behalf, subtly implying that Bobby wasn't good enough for her. Bobby, perceptive, picked up on Guang's tone instantly. The energy between them flared. He no longer held back. What followed was a sharp verbal exchange that left Guang speechless. Bobby accused him of interfering in matters that no longer concerned him. Emotionally defeated, Guang tried to reclaim his pride by reminding Bobby of his superior status. Now a CEO of a public company, unlike Bobby, who held a mid-level management role in a food firm, the power dynamic shifted momentarily. That's when Yumi returned. She hadn't been able to buy the clothes because she needed her phone. Bobby offered his coat to Guang, but but Guang snapped, refusing to wear something from a romantic rival. Yumi quickly intervened, silencing Guang and walking away with Bobby. Guang watched them leave, motionless. Yumi, deep in thought, realized that getting back together after a breakup might be one of the hardest things to sustain. Later that day, Yumi went on a date with Bobby. She wore their couple ring, a symbol of their anniversary, after discovering that Bobby had always kept his on. Touched by his quiet devotion, she felt ready to face him again with a renewed heart, but the reunion didn't go as she'd hoped. At the cafe, what should have been a heartwarming moment turned tense. Bobby went to order drinks, then abruptly returned, worried that she might feel pressured. Yumi said she was fine, but deep down, unease lingered.